So another point we thought we'd talk about, just very briefly, concerns the tribes of Israel. We'll give a short talk on that point. You have the Hebrew tribes. We have a book on the Hebrew tribes, and we were requested to say something in general on the Hebrew tribes, on their identifications. So we're not going to go into very much detail concerning the different tribes, but just briefly we'll mention it. We have a lot of biblical proofs concerning the 10 tribes, who the 10 tribes are, where they are, and these proofs are supplemented by linguistic evidence, other evidence, historical evidence, evidence from a lot of different sources, and also the peoples in the West are all descended from lost tribes of Israel. And we also, based on biblical sources, understand the Bible to say that the preeminent tribes, the main tribes, or those who will be preeminent amongst them all, will be the English-speaking peoples, will be the tribes of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. And we find Ephraim to have been dominant in Britain, and Manasseh dominant in the USA. Even though in the USA it may be that there are more descendants of Ephraim than those of Manasseh, we find Manasseh to have been very influential. We also tentatively identified the states of the USA with different tribes. We found an overwhelming proportion of the US states to represent Manasseh. Manasseh represents more states than all the other states put together. So that is another point that we have not yet published most of our findings on this matter, but it's a point of interest. So as we were saying, we have overall proofs identifying people in the West in general as descended from the tribes of Israel. We also have individual proofs concerning the individual tribal identification of these nations, and in some cases these proofs are very strong and we're quite certain about them. In other cases they're still tentative, and we may moderate them, edit them, adapt them, and we may still introduce changes into that whole scenario, but we work with what we have as we see it as we go. So based on the cover of our book, going from the bottom, we'll briefly describe what tribes we see, and what tribes which tribes we identify with the modern peoples. Naphtali we identify with Norway. Naphtali and Dan were the sons of Bilhah. Bilhah was the maidservant of Rachel. So they're often also found in history, when we trace the peregrinations and wanderings and movements of these peoples, we often find groups from groups from Dan together with Naphtali. And Dan we find in Denmark. Denmark is named after Dan. Also in their own historical traditions, they always say that their ancestor was someone named Dan, and they have characteristics of Dan in Denmark. And they are closely associated with the Norwegians and the Naphtali. We identify with Naphtali. Also, Naphtali, as characteristics of Naphtali, he was the youngest son. He had his own peculiarities, and some of this we find amongst the Norwegians. Also, we may say Naphtali, the name Naphtali, in Hebrew may be understood in modern Hebrew. In modern Hebrew may be understood to be associated with neft, with the petroleum. And Norway has become rich, is living off petroleum, which is a point of interest. Dan, till we find the Dan amongst the Denmarks, and they were known. They were known as Dan. Historically, we also find peoples known as Dan and also as Naphtali, who in Central Asia, who apparently historically moved to Scandinavia. So they would be the Danes of Denmark and the Norwegians of Naphtali, and they became the Vikings, and they invaded and settled in Ireland, in England, and we also find elements from down amongst the Irish, especially the Southern Irish, also in parts of England, in the southwest. And we also find Naphtali in parts of Ireland, even though on the whole we identify Ireland as Asher. Ireland today has only a few million people. It's a small country, it's smallly populated, but has a lot of Irishmen in the British Isles and also in the USA, and that is and it is important for that reason, and also for being what it is. The Northern Irish we identify with elements from Ephraim, from Manasseh, and from Judah, as well as from Asher, which is worth noting. Gad, we find Gad in the Swedes, amongst the Swedes. The Gothic peoples, Gad was created by Gothic peoples. The Gothic peoples were all over Scandinavia, but they seem to have been especially prominent in Sweden, but eventually became Sweden. Sweden was formed when the Goths and the Zebulon united. The Simeon is a name similar to that of Shion, also pronounceable as Sion, the firstborn son of Gad. And they created Sweden. The very name of the Goths, could be pronounced as Gad, and sometimes in place names it is pronounced as Gad, whereas the name Gad in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, could sometimes be pronounced as Goth. So that is a very important point. Goth is one way of pronouncing the tribal name of Gad. Also, one of the characteristics of Gad is that he worked in groups. He was described as working in groups. His name is derived from a word meaning group, Gedud. And even now, we checked it out on the internet. Swedish different peoples give character appraisals of their own country. So we found one from Swedish peoples. I know 5 or 6 more people from Sweden describing their own evaluation of their countrymen. And they all seem to say that the Swedes on the whole don't like leaders, or don't like being led. They prefer to sit around and talk things out and come to a group decision. And this is a characteristic of Gad according to his very name, according to Gad Gedud, is how Jacob referred to Gad. Gad would become a group. So that is a point. We also have the Netherlands. We find the Netherlands dominated by Zebulon. There was a people named Zebulon Goy, who actually lived in Jutland in what is Denmark, South Denmark, but they moved along with other people from Scandinavia into the Netherlands. The name Zebulon Goy in Hebrew means Goy, people of Zebulon. Also it says that Zebulon the Chof Yamim Yishkon, he will dwell on the shores of the sea. And the people of the Netherlands do dwell on the shores of the sea. 1/3, actually 2/3 of the whole country of the Netherlands, literally speaking, is on the shores of the sea. According to descriptions, you go and buy a house in the Netherlands and you want to work on your basement and you dig down a little bit, under the soil, thin layer of soil, you will come to sand, sea sand. Shores of the sea, that is what the Netherlands is. It is areas that were reclaimed from the sea. The sea was pushed back over the centuries. They built dams and they pumped the waters out, and they drained the waters away. And they reclaimed the land, and they did this again and again and again until they created the nation. They created it, literally speaking, from the shores of the sea. And there are quite a few other aspects of Zebulon that we find in the Netherlands. There may be other tribes also in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is an important country. Historically, it had a large empire. The Dutch Empire had a big influence. It was a worldwide empire. It influenced a lot of countries. Also, its examples of moderation of Dutch civilization have had a great influence. And they are valued people. And after the brother of Zebulon was Issachar. Zebulon was the one who went out on the ships. Issachar was the one who stayed at home. We identify Issachar with the people in Switzerland and also in Finland. And they are similar. And even though they're quite far apart, they're both on the edges. They're actually close together when you make a map of the tribes of Israel in Europe, and you eliminate the intervening non-Israelite sections. They join each other. Finland and Switzerland. Now, the peoples are not similar, but there are similarities. They're both traditionally neutral nations. They're both formidable warriors when they have to be. A lot of people in Finland believe they descend from Issachar, which is important. Note that we also find elements from Gad in Finland. But mainly Issachar seems to dominate, and many of them have some type of tradition that they descend from Issachar. They also have Hebrew customs, and different aspects of their culture indicate possible Israelite origins. So too the Swiss, so too we have in other ways. The Swiss also have similarities to Israelite nations. The Swiss may be partly non-Israelite, partly they are, and they are who they are, and the name Issachar connotes Sachar, taking commissions. Issachar says Issachar, in case Issachar will dwell in a mountain-bound country, which the Swiss do. That they would be neutral, which the Swiss are. They would be formidable warriors when they have to be, as we mentioned. Also the Swiss, the name Swiss means take commissions. And that is what the Swiss do in many ways. They take other people's money, and they use that money and store it up, and then the people's money they use pay them commissions for doing that. And that is an important aspect of their economy. And they're known for being reliable in this matter. Issachar in Hebrew means Sachar, take a reward, take a commission. Also we have Yehuda. Yehuda gave rise to the Jews. So everyone knows about the Jews. The Jews are who they are. The very name Yehuda means acknowledge. Giving knowledge, own up to God. Yehuda will also be acknowledged by his brothers according to the blessing of their forefather Jacob, which is worth noting. Judah in the end times will be acknowledged by his brothers, meaning that up until the end times he would not have been. We also have Levi who will be scattered with the other tribes, but also learn Torah, and that is what we do. We do find the Jews, whom Levi is a part. They have been faithful to the Torah, relatively speaking, in their own way. They've learned it and developed it and given it out, and they still keep on doing that. And Levi is prominent amongst Torah scholars. We see it. We see the names of people who wrote important books that are still referred to. A lot of books, classical works that are considered authoritative hundreds of years after they've been written. A lot of the authors are Levi. It says Levi, written by Levi, Jacob Levi, Dan Levi, Samuel Levi, this and that, or a lot. Cohen, also Cohen, the Cohens were part of Levi. So too, Cohen is the name. Very prominent. This has been noted that we are not the only ones noted. This is a whole book's been written about it. This is a point. It says that Judah would be my lawmaker, and Levi also was associated with this, and they have been making the laws. They had the right to do so according to the Bible. We find Simeon. It says that Simeon will be scattered amongst the other tribes, so we find elements from Simeon, possibly in northern Italy, also amongst the Welsh, amongst the Irish, amongst the British, and elsewhere. Reuben, we find the Reuben to have been predominant in France. We're not saying that all the French are from Israelites. A good portion of them probably are not, but the Israelites are there. Israelites have been important in their culture, in the composition of their nation. And Reuben helped give rise to the nation of France. Reuben, they had the Ribuari, Franks. Ribuari means Reuben, see a son. And also the other names of other tribes, sons of Reuben, are to be found amongst the French. Also the characteristics of associated with these names also to be found amongst the French. And the French have always been important. And the French have often striven to be the firstborn, to be the foremost amongst the peoples of the world. We had Napoleon, we had Louis XIV, we had others, the Sun King, also the sun, the cock crow, and other symbols associated with Reuben were also important in French culture. And the identity France is associated with the rising sun and the rooster. The rooster crows at sunrise. Jewish tradition, as seen on depictions of the tribes or the tribal symbols, often depict the rising sun as the symbol of Reuben. Technically, Reuben was the firstborn, but his firstborn right was taken away from him and had been given to Joseph. Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. It says in 1 Chronicles chapter 5:1. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel. He was indeed the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel. So that the genealogy is now listed according to the birthright. Judah prevailed over his brothers, and from him came a ruler, although the birthright was Joseph's. We identify Joseph with English-speaking peoples. The sons of Joseph were Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim and Manasseh are to be found in Britain and the offshoots of Britain and in the USA. Ephraim is dominant in the British domain, that is Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada and other areas, and Manasseh is dominant in the American sphere. Manasseh included many from the western parts of the British Isles who moved to the USA, and also Israelites from Germany who were not Germans but descendants of Israel, who had been trapped, one could say, due to historical migrations in Germany, and later moved to the USA in the 1700s. And it was a mass movement of peoples. And of those who moved were mostly descendants of Manasseh, as we have explained elsewhere. Jacob, the patriarch, Jacob also known as Israel, had blessed Joseph. The blessings of your father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors. And to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills, they shall be on the head of Joseph, and the crown of him that was separated from his brethren. Joseph, beyond merely receiving an extra portion, as if he were the firstborn, also has an additional task, an additional merit. And in some way he represents all of Israel. This is also mentioned not only in the Bible, but also by rabbinical commentators such as Rabbi Yishmael ben Abraham Halevi Horowitz, 1555-1630, and others. And also the Bible refers to it. Jeremiah 31:9 says, I'm a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Joseph has the aspect of Jacob above the other tribes. Jacob, is Joseph and his two sons Ephraim and Manasseh. Joseph was to receive all the blessings of Israel, but in a much greater portion. Joseph is linked directly to Yaakov. The name Yaakov can also refer to Joseph, as the commentators explain, and the Yank is a nickname for an American, and the Yank is a shortened form of the name Yaakov, Yankov. Joseph was to receive material prosperity according to the Bible, mineral resources, agricultural bounty, to control the strategic thoroughfares of the globe, to the gates of his enemies, the gates of the enemies of Israel, he would control them. Strategic points throughout the earth, the USA and the British with the empire have fulfilled this blessing and this prophecy. Genesis 48:19 says that the seed of Ephraim shall become a multitude of nations. This was understood to say that the seed will be involved with the fullness of nations, and nations will need him to complete themselves. They cannot give expression to themselves without him. He will rule over them. And this has been fulfilled first by the British and the British Empire, and after that in America, through America. and its influence that is exerted all over the earth. Ephraim is compared to a bull, and a bull calf, see Jeremiah 31:10. In English, they were nicknamed John Bull. The term angle, as in Anglo-Saxon, in Hebrew is a pronunciation of the word angle, meaning bull calf. And the British were nicknamed John Bull. So too, America is America. The name America is derived from Ha-Machiri, meaning literally the sons of Machir. Machir was the firstborn son of Manasseh. See Genesis 50:23, Numbers 26:29, Numbers 32:39, 40 or not. Machir is also the father of Gilead, also an important section in American history, 1 Chronicles 2:21. And the commonly accepted etymology of the term America is that it derives from Americo Vespucci, 1451-1512. It was also referred to as Americo or America, and America, the continent of America, is named after him. He derived his name from a medieval pronunciation of the term Ha-Machiri, as shown by documentary evidence. In Hebrew, the name Ha-Machiri means the sons of Machir. In Latin, it became America, and it was used amongst peoples in southern France in medieval Europe, and Americo also received his name through the same source, so that indirectly, America received his name from the term Ha-Machiri, meaning the sons of Machir, and indirectly he gave, and through him, America received its name. Indirectly, America is named after Ha-Machiri, the sons of Machir, and Machir is the firstborn son of Manasseh. So America is named after the offsprings of Manasseh. So this helps confirm identification of America with Manasseh. So we have gone through all of the tribes. We have identified them and briefly in an outline form, giving you some indication as to how we reach these identifications. Thank you, may the Lord God of Israel bless you.